Okay, here we go. So what we're going to be doing is we're connecting tests to this week's Parsha, which is, anyone, you want to message in? Mark, what's this week's Parsha? On the spot? Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha. It's the story of Abraham, and if you want to find out the whole story of Abraham, after the class, go to my YouTube channel. Last year we did the story of Abraham and the whole shtick of the journey of Abraham. So that was last year. So you can go to my YouTube channel and access that. And I'm going to be putting it on social media. But tonight we're going to be connecting to the notion of, in Hebrew, nisyonot, tests, and connecting tests to this week's section. And why it's relevant is the following. There's a verse in next week's Parsha which says, V'Elokim nisa et Avraham. That Hashem tested Abraham. Okay, Richard, the line, God tested Abraham. Why? Why does God test? He doesn't. And by the way, we're going to learn soon that we're all tested. In fact, it says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that Hashem tested Abraham. How many tests? How many tests? Any ideas? 10 tests. Come to the table, guys. Come to the table. Come to the table. We have more room here. Come to the table. Yeah. Wherever you are.
Wherever you want to go.
Hashem tested with 10 tests, and we are taught, everybody. We are taught. Nice to see you, Esther, on Facebook. We are taught that each one of you all go through in your lives 10 tests. We are all going to go through the journey of 10 tests. How many do you think you've gone through so far?
About 8.
No, I'm not sure. With your age, I'm not sure, mate. I reckon, please God, most people live for only, 90, let's say to 80, 90, and then really, let's say the tests really begin from bar and bas mitzvah. It doesn't really have a point having tests between your 13 and 12 kind of thing. So then you can do the maths. Anyone good at maths? Come on, Katya. Right? 13 till 90, right? So you've got 77 years. So every 7 years or so, there should be a test going on since you've been 13, 12. Obviously, Hashem can make a few little, a couple of tests all in one. But generally, he spreads out the tests a bit. Generally. Saying that, with that said, Jacob finished his tests, and at the end of his tests, then he chilled. His last 17 years of his life, he was able to relax, which is, by the way, a beautiful idea for you, Kabbalistically, that the best times in your life will be post the tests. When you can just overcome the test, at that point, there's huge blessings. Huge blessings come in. And especially when you finished all 10 of them, then you can really chill out. But fortunately, most of life is tests. We need to try and understand why that is. Why that is. So here we go. Abraham had 10 tests. I think it's very important. I should quickly tell you what those 10 tests were. Already, it's actually a machlokas, it's a discussion what the 10 tests were. So Rashi, according to Rashi, test number 1, Abraham hid underground for 13 years from this king Nimrod who wanted to kill him. That was Abraham's first test. Test number 2, he threw him in a fiery furnace. Not a good one. Scary one. In fact, the mystics say it was more of a problem for the furnace than for Abraham. Abraham, such fire for Hashem, he was way more fiery than the furnace, and he was fine. He was sababa in that. Number 3, Abraham was commanded to leave his family. That's this week. Lech Lecha, where God said to Abraham, leave it all behind, leave your family, leave your land, time to come to Israel. Any one of you made Aliyah? It's a test. That's a big test. All those of you in Tel Aviv watching, right? One of the biggest tests, making Aliyah intense. That was Abraham's test this week. That was test number 3. Number 4, as soon as he arrived in Israel, he was forced to leave and he had to escape a famine, which is exactly a bit like Israel. Nefesh b'nefesh, everything's going to be amazing. You're going to get there. You're going to get a job. You're going to get a flat. 3 months later, no job, no flat, no girlfriend, no dog, on the bench. It's a bit of a disaster, right? Well, that's the idea. Hashem says, go, it's going to be great. Lech lecha. And then there's this vayihira of ba'aretz. There's a famine in the land. It's always the way. It's the way Hashem does it. He tries to elevate you spiritually, and just when you think, it's going to be easy now, one more test. How are you going to handle that one now? Or are you going to quit and say, no, it's too tough. I'm out there. That's the test. So that was the number 4 test for Abraham. Number 5, Sarah was kidnapped by Pharaoh. Number 6, the king captured Lot. 7, God told Abraham that his offspring would suffer under 4 monarchies. Number 8, at an advanced age, he had to do circumcision. That's pretty intense. In his 90s, having a bris. There's a reason why an 8-day-old baby boy has the bris, right? Can't complain. Can't say no. Number 9, he was commanded to drive away Ishmael and Hagar. And number 10, he was commanded to sacrifice Isaac. The number 1, the biggest test of all, is the Akedah. next week. And that's where actually God says, and God tested Abraham. But again, why we share this with you is great Rabbi Twersky, not the modern day Rabbi Twersky, Rav Menachem Twersky of Chernobyl, says this deep idea that each one of us go through 10 tests in our life. So the question is why? Why does God need to test? Is he like a professor who's a bit frustrated? He likes to give exams. I like to test. Guys, you need a bit of a test. Crystal, let's give you another test. And why does it? And by the way, from God's perspective, he knows the future, which we're not going to speak about tonight. Don't worry. No, that's a whole different talk. We need another hour for that. But on a deep question, when you have a test, is it a test if I say to you, what is 2 times 2? Mm-hmm. It's not a test. It's not a test. Not a test. If I ask you, what is 2.2 billion times 3.74 trillion, to do it without a calculator in 5 seconds, hopefully that's not a test either, because you just can't do it. Maybe Bradley can. Can you do that? Right? He's thinking, right? But not in 5 seconds, right? So in other words, think about it. Is a test, if a test is something you can do easily, that's not a test. If a test is something that's impossible for you to do, that's also not a test. So what's the concept of a test? And especially from God's perspective to us, why do we go through tests? So very briefly, before we get into the solutions, I want to share with you what Rabbi Tatz teaches based on his teachings from Moshe Shapiro. And here we go. And hopefully just if you understand the macro concept of tests, it's going to be much more comfortable and easier for you when you do get tests, okay? So God doesn't test you because he doesn't like you. He doesn't test you because he wants to punish you. I think sometimes people think, I'm being punished. I must have sinned so much, I'm being punished. That's a whole different religion. You can go to a different channel to watch that one, right? The Jewish channel, it's not about guilt. It's not about sins. That's not the reason why we're tested. Why are we tested? Explains Rabbi Tatz, the point of a test is to get to a place in that test when you can't do it. When actually there's a scenario you can't do it yourself. Because again, if you could do it yourself, if I ask you to go for a run for 5 minutes, please God, most people will be able to go for a run for 5 minutes. If I ask you to go for a run for 5 hours, but there will be a point where maybe you'll be able to get there. But what about when you hit that point if I ask you to fly? If I ask you to fly, and not with an airplane, just you yourself go and jump off a building and start flying. By the way, please don't do that, anyone. And don't sue me if anyone's tried it. This is there's no liability for that. That's just sorry, please don't. Hopefully it's going to be a lot more comforting than that, right? But what have I started? But don't jump off buildings. But if that was the test to go flying, you couldn't do that test. Explains Rabbi Tatz that the point of the test is at a certain point you say, Hashem, I can't do it anymore. I can't. Finished. You help me. Only with your help, Hashem, am I going to get through it. And at that point, you're passing the test. Because at that point, the magic happens. Again, the perception is that we're all this macho crew that you want to get this all crystals, man? That can overcome our own tests. We can't. The only thing that you can control is your spirituality, is your ethics, is your kindness, is your mitzvahs. How much money you earn, you can't control. How healthy you'll be, you can't control. Whether your success in relationships, you're not going to be able to control. Overcoming spiritual tests, you yourself can't do it. What you need to do is you ask Hashem for help. You ask Hashem for help, and that's when you'll succeed. You need help from Hashem. You need help from Hashem. So that's the idea of a test, that you stick in there and at a certain point, you turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, help me. Bang, that's when the magic can happen. That's the first idea. In other words, the point of a test is not to reveal your might, it's to reveal God's might. That's why we're here in this world. We've got Harry next to me here. Harry's not here to reveal Harryness to the world. Sorry to say, right? Harry's here to reveal his place in God in the world. And to what's called make a kiddush Hashem, to sanctify Hashem, to illuminate that unique light of God that you have in you, and to make a vessel for Hashem to shine his light through you. And the way you do that, ironically, is by doing less, getting out the way, and asking, surrendering and saying, Hashem, you take over. When you can say the words, Hashem, I can't do it anymore, but I'm going to hang in there and you're going to do it. That's how we split the Red Sea. When Hashem jumped, we can't split the Red Sea. But we had to make the jump, and then Hashem split the Red Sea. You with me? So that's the first idea. When it comes to a test, don't think that you have to pass the test. You have to stay in the game and not lose your faith, and then God pass the test for you. That's the first concept. So it's revealing your place in Hashem's greatness. With that said and done, my amazing mentor, Rabbi Abraham J. Twersky, uses an example of lobsters. Any of you know lobster? We've got a dog in the house. Any of you actually have a lobster? Right? So how can I know a lot of lobbyists, but how can lobsters teach us the notion of test? So if you can go on YouTube and check out Rabbi Twersky and Lobsters, and you'll see what he says. It's such a good share. I know. And he says the following, and it's beautiful. He says, how does a lobster grow? How does a lobster grow? Anyone ever thought about that? Everyone gone to the pub discussing how lobsters grow? Right? Well, get out a bit, guys. Right? Have fun. Right? So how does a lobster grow? Think about it. It's got this shell around it. It's this like little mushy part of the lobster in the shell. How does it ever grow? Because the shell's the shell. Do you know how the lobster grows? When the lobster starts feeling pain. When the lobster starts feeling discomfort. When the lobster starts feeling tested, the lobster starts feeling I'm uncomfortable. It starts moving around a bit and sheds the shell. And then a larger shell comes. And then it happens again. The lobster starts feeling discomfort, starts feeling unsettled, starts feeling in pain. And once again, the shell sheds and a greater shell appears. Explains Rabbi Twersky, that's exactly what we go through. Our mistake is when pain comes, we say, let's take antidepressants, or Prozac, or paracetamol, or Nurofen. Right? The pain comes in, we just want to stop the pain. We don't understand, actually the pain is a blessing to teach us that we're growing. And that now we need a greater shell to contain us, because we can do more in this world, just by passing the test. Are you with me? So next time that test comes to you, next time that pain comes in, don't run the other way and say, woe is me, and say, oh, God hates me. He loves you. The way Rabbi Tatz puts it, you have 40 days in your life without a test, you should worry. Because we're here in this world to spiritually grow, so when everything's just called sababa, as you say in Tel Aviv, everything's sababa, everything's chilled, everything's just ragua, something's not right. You should be growing. Does that mean you're not growing? You're just sleeping? You're just drinking? You're just sunbathing? Like, what's going on? If you're growing, it should be discomfort. There should be unsettlement. There should be that feeling of it's not easy, unease, and then getting through that phase, that's when you grow. Or any of you are athletes. Any athletes in the room? You look a bit, athletic. Right, exactly. Right, definitely not me. Right, but in my time, I was a little bit of a footballer. And to be fair, the thing I hated more than anything was like all the exercise you got to do beforehand and the stretches, and it's like, but the truth is it really helps you, because when you start stretching, and by the way, any of you do stretching, it really hurts, like proper stretching, like agony. Ironically, that pain creates gain, because that pain allows your muscles to start moving in a way that now you can run faster, achieve more, no pain, no gain, as we call it. In Pirkei Avot, lefun sa'ara agra. According to the effort is the reward. According to the pain is the reward. So ironically, pain means you're growing. But yet we're living in such a crazy world. It's like, oh, pain, hate that. We've got to get rid of it. We want an easy life. Everyone wants easy. But actually, how are you going to grow? How are you going to become the greatest soul that you can become without growing pains? Because if there's no pains, you're not growing. So you can choose to just kind of stay as a child, like a Peter Pan, and never grow, and just look to have fun forever. But that's not why we're here in this world. We're here in this world to grow, and now we start understanding, I'm hoping, the concept of tests. Maybe just one other analogy. One of my students in Tel Aviv, I don't know if you're watching, Anastasia, she's actually an Olympian weightlifter. And what's amazing is if you're going to become a weightlifter, you have to start off with weights that you can handle. There's points in the training when you're in agony trying and pick up something that you can't pick up. So there's this point of like, I can't do it. But then hanging in there, all of a sudden you can do it. My dear friends, sometimes in your life, you'll feel that Hashem's giving you weights that you can't lift up. I definitely have felt that in my life. I'm sure some of you had. That's your training. That's giving you the ability, if you just persevere and hang in there and ask Hashem for help and do these 6 solutions that I'm going to come to soon, before you'll be able to be an Olympic weightlifter as well. Instead of doing what some people do, whoa, it's too heavy, I'm putting it down, I'm never lifting a weight ever again. That's how most people are. Now, weightlifting, to be honest, apart from you, Anastasia, you have to, that's your gig. But for all of us, we don't have to, but we do have to lift our emotional, spiritual weights that Hashem sends us. That's part of our growth. And for you to become that Olympian, you're going to have to go through, at times, painful challenges to get there. So that's kind of a bit of the background, everyone. Any questions before we go on? So far, so good? So here we go. What I'd like to share with you tonight is to get a bit Kabbalistic and to give you some deep spiritual techniques how to overcome them. First thing you need to know, according to the Slonim Rebbe, the Nesiv Shalom, is there's a point when you have a test, Hashem takes away what we call in Kabbalah, your gadlus the moichin. Let me explain. There's something called higher consciousness and lower consciousness. There's when you're really channeling, you at your highest level, with you and your wheel flying. I can see none of you are there yet, right? Hopefully stay with me another 40 minutes, right? When you're in a place of higher consciousness, that's when you're cruising. That's when you're achieving. When the test comes in, the first thing to know, Hashem takes away that higher consciousness, plunges you into a place of darkness, where Rabbi Nachman calls the Makkah Shechora, this black fog, this kind of, you're in this place of total darkness. Some people call it depression. Some people call it like you're down, you've got no energy, you're fatigued. And it's dafka because at that point, kind of your battery gets taken out, and now Hashem's, now what are you going to do? Are you going to give up? Are you going to cry? Are you going to go backwards? Are you going to still hang in there? And at that point, keep going and keep moving forwards and having your emunah and bitachon and all the things we're going to speak about soon. So therefore, don't think when you're feeling low and the test comes that you can't cope. It's exactly how you're meant to be at that point. You're feeling exactly the way Hashem actually took away that higher place of consciousness. And just by hanging in there, in the end, you will go back to the highest state of consciousness. But that time, next time, you'll be on a higher level to be able to lift higher weights. So you'll be on a higher place of higher consciousness. But you needed to come down to go up. We call it in Kabbalah, Yerida Tzarich Aliyah. Oh my gosh, my Olympian is watching tonight. Awesome, Anastasia. What have you written? Emotional psychological weight is even more challenging than the weight on the bar. Thank you. So our Olympian is even saying that she has it easy. Trust me, I couldn't do what you do, right? But we have it way harder. Hashem should bless you and you should continue lifting your physical weights and your spiritual weights too. So here we go. First of all, there's a great tzaddik called Rabbi Biederman. And Rabbi Biederman, if I can find it, explains a couple of things on the concept of test just before we get into the 6 solutions. Because I tell you, I meet a lot of people. I always say, when I became a rabbi, I thought people were going to ask me deep, Talmudic questions, complicated, how does the Arizal fit Reb Chaim Vital? People are asking me stuff about tests and challenges, and normally it's either about relationships or health or money. Nothing else, really. In Tel Aviv, there's a new one called apartments, right? To get an apartment in Tel Aviv, that's a test in itself, right? It's a nightmare. It's impossible, right? Hashem creates a whole new bracket of tests, like apartments in Tel Aviv. But apart from that, that's why people can't come to see me. And people don't like tests. And they try and skirt around them, and they try do what we call test avoidance. And if you ever done test avoidance before, you're like, no, we don't want to do that. So let me give you a mashal that Rabbi Biederman brings. Rabbi Biederman said there was a deep hole in the middle of the ground. I think we had one in Finchley Lane a few weeks ago. And all the cars had to drive around it. So the council goes and asks the councilmen, the workers, to come and fix it. So what do the worker do? The worker sees the hole, also starts driving round. starts driving round, doesn't want to fall in the hole, and goes back to the council. The boss said, what are you doing? You're there to fix the hole. Explains Rabbi Biederman, that's what we do. That's what we do. We've been brought here to fix the hole, not to skirt round the hole, to drive round the hole. There's a problem, deal with it. So let me give an example. Let's what be an example. Let's say there's a problem with a relationship. Someone's got a problem with a relationship. So instead of saying, let's end it, and then swipe someone else, right? Maybe deal with it. Deal with it. Work it out. Maybe you're being too egotistical. Maybe you're not compromising enough. Maybe you're not communicating enough. And people want this short-term pleasure, and they're not willing to deal at issues. Do you know how many people are getting married now, and within even the first year, they're getting divorced? And obviously, maybe sometimes there's tragic situations where that's the right thing, but many, many times people just aren't hanging in there and working on it and trying to fix the hole. And by the way, when Hashem creates, and if any of you are going through a test right now, let's say in relationships where you're with your partner and it's not easy, it's not meant to be easy. And if it's very hard, sometimes it's very hard because that's the test that Hashem has brought you into this world to try and fix, not to try and run away from. And we do that in finance, and we do that with health, and we do that with spirituality. And this is what Rabbi Biederman is saying. Fix it. Fix the thing. Rabbi Elia Lopian uses a parable and says, sometimes you can come, imagine you came into a palace, and in the palace, everything was topsy-turvy. Everything was all over the place. How can this be? He explains, because when you come in, they're obviously renovating. And they're fixing things along. And they're building, and they're improving. And that's why in our life, my friends, in our life, when you feel that everything's topsy-turvy, it's not because it's just a mess and I'm a mess. No! You have a chance to improve things and to renovate and to make your palace beautiful. And that's the different way to look at what tests are. Okay, with that said and done, let's start going to the 6 solutions. Are you ready for this? Solution number 1, here we go. This is deep, this is not an easy one. This is quite hard maybe to swallow sometimes. I'll give you a story. I'm going to give you quite a few stories tonight. Is that all right, Elliot? You like stories? We'll give you stories? Again, as the rabbi, I didn't think I've got to learn stories. As opposed to, I thought I had to learn Talmud, but I've got to learn how to get apartments in Tel Aviv and stories. Okay, so Rabbi Yeshua Weisberg said this story. It happened to him. He's a rabbi from Betah. Rabbi Biederman says this story. Listen to this. He said the following. A few years back, this Rabbi Weisberg, he fell into great debt. He was really struggling. Remember I said there's 3 things normally: finances, health, and relationships. He had a horrendous problem. And he also had relationship problems for his kids. He really struggled to marry off his kids. Very ultra-Orthodox community where you do the shidduchim, and it wasn't going well. Hashem wasn't blessing him in the Erev shidduchim. So he just felt terrible. He felt what we call the Midas Hadin. Midas Hadin, which is important because it says, Va'elokim nisais Avraham. Hashem has these 2 attributes. Hashem sometimes is Elokim, which is just, strict. And then Hashem has Rachamim, mercy. When we're being tested, Hashem's being strict with us. Which, by the way, Rabbi Twersky, back to Abraham J. Twersky, uses an analogy. He says, he understood the strictness of Hashem's, a good metaphor. He said once he saw in a GP practice, a young little kid chilling with his mom, going into the surgery. All of a sudden, the doctor pulls out a needle. The child starts crying, screaming, no, what's he doing? And then he plunges the needle into him and the baby's screaming now. And it's like, what are you doing? But then afterwards, the child's going to his mum for a hug. Rabbi Twersky explains, why didn't the child say, Mummy, I never want to speak to you again. How dare you bring me to this doctor? Like you're an abuser. That's when Hashem tests us, maybe sometimes with very harsh tests. It's not because he doesn't love us, because he does love us and he wants to protect us. And just like a mother loves the child and wants to give the children the vaccination needed to protect them from future illnesses, similarly, Hashem at times gives us tremendous challenges, but does it out of love, the way that mother loves that child. So anyway, this rabbi was being very much tested, what's called tremendous midas hadin. So he was advised to go to America to try and search for money. And he said, but if you're going to America, make a stopover. And at this point, I have to tell you something amazing, divine providence that happened to Rabbi Hill last night, which I think some of you are going to gain from. So as I was preparing for tonight's talk, doing all my research, I hear this one rabbi on the internet called Rabbi Moshe Weinberger, who's a big tzaddik. I recommend you listen to his stuff. He's quoting a story about this rabbi who's buried in Frankfurt. Okay, looked it up. And then I'm looking up Rabbi Biederman's Divrei Torah, and he's quoting a different story about a rabbi buried in Frankfurt, and it's the same rabbi. So if any of you are anywhere in Germany, you're going to have to go and see this tzaddik. You know, apparently the tremendous salvations happen if you go to the grave of this tzaddik. And the name of the tzaddik who's buried in Frankfurt is Rabbi Yisrael Frankfurter. He was a Stoliner chassid, and he became the Rebbe. Guess at what age? See if anyone can guess at what age. When do you think is like a normal age to become the Rebbe? You know, normally become the Rebbe at 70 years old, 60 years old. He became the Rebbe at 4.5 years old. True story. I don't know. I wasn't there, you know, but he was called the Yanuka, the child. Apparently he was the child prodigy. Listen, Rebecca married Isaac at 3 years old. You know, Abraham worked out there was Hashem at 3 years old. Apparently he was a child genius, child prodigy. He was already, they knew he was enlightened. He was the one. He was Neo, if you want to use that expression, Matrix style, right? He was Neo. And therefore, they knew that he had to be the Rebbe. He was made the Rebbe at 4.5, and he was incredibly enlightened as he lived a very full life. Miracles happened through him. And when he passed away, tremendous salvations are gone if you go to his grave. So they said to this rabbi, go to the grave. So anyway, so he goes to Frankfurt and he gets off and this is kind of a Hasidic guy. He doesn't even speak, you know, wouldn't even know how's he going to even communicate with the Germans to get to this grave. And the first divine providence happens. He comes out of the airport and he sees this Israeli who's got a car, and they start speaking in Hebrew, and the Israeli takes him he knew exactly where the grave was. He took him to that grave. And by the way, the Israeli taxi driver himself was super inspired. It's like really random, bumping into this rabbi, taking him in there. He went and he gained from that. Anyway, he prayed there. He said for 45 minutes. He prayed, he cried. He asked Hashem for help. And the idea of going to a tzaddik, very basically, you don't pray to the tzaddik. You ask the tzaddik to advocate for you. And you're in such a holy spiritual place, it really elevates your prayers. That's why it really works. Anyway, he went there. He asked for help. He asked Hashem for help. He turns around. And now he's coming back to America. Fine. He comes back to America. And what happens? He goes to the synagogue the first morning he's in America, and he bumps in to an old friend of his from 30 years back. But it was a friend who they weren't that friendly. It was a friend who this rabbi, to his shame, made fun of. He made fun of. It was when they were young boy, this boy had a stutter, a terrible stutter. And the rabbi, when he was a young kid, had made fun of this boy. And now, 30 years later, they both recognize each other. And the rabbi comes and says, like, hi. And I can't believe it's you. And they start speaking. Man, you can speak now. And he goes, yeah, I don't have people embarrassing me now. I'm good. And the boy was really angry. The guy with the stutter was really upset, really furious. And the rabbi pleaded for forgiveness. He goes, no, I'm not going to forgive you. You ruined my life. You know, I'm still traumatized by what you did. Anyway, the guy with the stutter also needed help for charity, and he said he's marrying off his child. And the rabbi says, you know what, I've only got $300. You can have all my $300. Please take it. I honestly asked for forgiveness. I mean it. I'm going to do it full teshuvah. Anyway, he did teshuvah. The guy forgave him, amazingly, with the $300. Maybe it helped. Bit of a sweetener. And from that moment, things started changing. Just a bit of a shift. The din got a bit less. But there was one more ordeal this rabbi had to go through. The rabbi now is going to this wedding, and he's asked to sometimes when the Hasidim go to a wedding, many of them have got to go, like, basically, they go to like a hotel where there's 8, 9 in a room. I went through that experience just now in Uman. Wouldn't recommend it. And this rabbi himself was really embarrassed because he had he terribly snored. So he was like, this isn't going to go well. Anyway, he started snoring like a train, like a James Bond kind of train, like the ultimate train with a huge noise, and woke everyone up. And now they're starting to make fun of him. And all of a sudden, they're just ribbing in, and they start copying and emulating and replicating his snore. And this guy's now getting a bit devastated, getting super embarrassed, and actually has to walk out, take his stuff. In the middle of the night, the rabbi gets out, says, okay, I can't do this anymore. And he's now going totally red. He's shaking with embarrassment. And when he's there when he's walking in the streets that night, and he's like, okay, Hashem, I see what you're doing. You're making me now go through what I made that young boy go through 30 years earlier. This is what I needed. And from that moment, things changed. Amazing business deal opportunity happened. His money came back. He made the shidduchim for the kids. And says Rabbi Biederman, this is solution number 1 when we have a test. Scan back in our lives and think, is there anything we could have done wrong which is connected to the test we're going through? The concept in Talmud is called midah keneged midah. Measure for measure. Nothing's random. Nothing's just, I was unlucky. If it's a financial test, is there anything I could have done better financially? Nothing's random, and sometimes there's got to be this inner root treatment that's got to happen, that we sometimes need to go through a bit of karma and a bit of embarrassing experience sometimes just to rectify something that might have happened last month, last year, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, maybe even a previous life ago, because it goes all the way to Gilgulim, and we just need to be aware of that. So that's number 1, which is essentially try and think back, is there anything I haven't done to Shuvah for yet? Is there anything I haven't repented for in my life? Anything I haven't fixed in my own life? That's point number 1. Solution? Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
You said that we don't experience suffering and tests and stuff as a punishment, but then at the same time,
Good. I was just thinking that someone was going to ask me that. And as we went through it, excellent. So here's the thing. It's not as a punishment. But don't do punishments. We're not like, hey, let's just beat you up. Let's give you the cane. Let's torture you. God forbid. But when we mess up, if you've got the beautiful white tablecloth and you pour wine on that white tablecloth, there's a big stain now. For your sake, let's get rid of the stain. For our sake. So sometimes we create the hole in the road. So then we need to go through challenges to fix up the hole that we created. As a kapara, which actually means to cover up as well. One of the words for atonement means to cover up, mamash. So thank you for that, right? And for sure, it's kapara. Next, the Sfadim are good at that, right? Next time something hard happens, say kapara. Let it be atonement. Let it be atonement. But critically, it's not that the pain is the atonement. That's the point. You need to learn a lesson and say, what can I do better? How can I improve? Is there something I did wrong in my past that I need to do tshuva for? That's point number 1. Number 2. Says the Nesiv Shalom, the Solomon Rebbe, he writes, one solution of how to overcome the test. You ready for this, everyone? Say, Hashem, thank you. King David says it in Tehillim. Oitecha ki anisoni. Thank you for testing me. Thank you for afflicting me. What we normally do is, Hashem, you're horrible, you're mean. Or that I'm not even talking to you for like a year, right? If we go to like, you get angry with God, or, which by the way, if it's very harsh, traumatic, then that's what you're going through, that's what you're going through. Sometimes you've got to process, sometimes you're not ready to accept it with love, which is fair enough. But the goal is, and this is what Avraham did every time correctly, whatever Hashem tested Avraham Avinu, he accepted with love. Hashem says to Avram, go to Israel and it's going to be amazing. Lech lecha. Why does it say lecha? Lecha means lecha. You're going to make a lot of money. It's going to be great for you. He gets there. There's a famine. Abraham doesn't say, Hashem, I'm going to sue you. Do you know what he says? He says, Baruch Hashem. Okay. Pseida. Let's go to Egypt. And they kidnap his wife. You're not going to say Baruch Hashem for that, right? But they understood. It was also a test. They understood it was also divine providence. And actually, Paro should have been more scared than Sarah was. Sarah was fine. No one's messing with Sarah. Paro couldn't get near her. But everything was for a reason. And if you can just accept tests with love, that's how he overcame every test. It says he omad bin esoyen. He withstood the test. One of the ways to withstand the test is to say, Hashem, thank you, because really we're here in this world to love Hashem. That's why Hashem has made us to have this love affair with Hashem. So for the love affair to be stretched, like Anastasia is there, for you to lift the weights, you have to have more and more weights to prove that you're a great weightlifter. We need to be great lifters of Abbas Hashem, of love of Hashem. So when everything's easy in your life, big deal. You know, when everything's, you fall in love and you get under the chuppah, I love you, Hashem. Shkoyach, very good. Yeah, well done, everyone. Well done for loving Hashem when everything's going right. Try loving Hashem when everything's going carnage, when it's going pear-shaped. I was watching on one of the Facebook websites for singles, because I'm getting much more into matchmaking now. There was this young girl just saying she gives up. She's done. She's done it. She's done. She can't go through the whole dating process anymore. It's too painful. That's a test. That's it. My neshama felt for her. And if you're watching, which I'd be a miracle if you were, but because I didn't know your name, but if you're watching, just don't give up. Of course you can feel that pain. But you say, Hashem, it's up to you now, Hashem. You be the matchmaker. I give up I don't give up in getting married. I give up in stressing about it. Hashem, you do the stressing now, and I love you just the same. If you can say when things are going really pear-shaped in your life, Hashem, I love you even more. Like that little child was able to hold on to the mum when he's going through terrible pain, because he knows innately the mum loves us. We need to know innately Hashem loves us. And that's tactic number 2. To know Hashem loves us, and that's what Avraham Avinu did. And by the way, he says one of my favorite tzaddikim called the Kedushas Levi, Levi Yitzchak Bedichev. He says the following. Listen to this, everybody. What's the first blessing of the Amidah? Baruch atah Hashem Elokei, Avraham Elokei, Yitzchak Elokei, Yaakov. It's the blessing called the forefathers, the patriarchs. So how does it conclude? We should conclude the patriarch's blessing, Baruch atah Hashem. We should have concluded it, Magen Avot. But we don't. How does it conclude, anyone? Magen Avraham. We just talk about Abraham. It's like, whoa. What about Isaac and Jacob? What is it, Magen Avraham? Why do we conclude the patriarch's blessing just with Abraham? Yeah, Kachi, are we good with that? Yeah. I'll have to show you later. So listen to this. Beautiful. What does Avraham symbolize? He's all about love, chesed, kindness. That's what Abraham was. Do you know who Yitzchak is? Gevurah. He's there to bring out Hashem's justice and discipline and strictness. Jacob's there to bring out Hashem's balance and harmony and what's called Tiferes. Says the Kedushas Levi, when things are going tough in your life, when the Gevurah is happening, when it's pear-shaped, you're not making any money, you're not finding any dates, you're not getting any swipes. Hashem's doing it, Mogen Avraham, because he loves you. B'chach Choisman, the Talmud says, Avraham, I'm going to conclude reality with you. Everything's about you. Everything's about love. So even when things are balanced, but when things are tough, when there's even Gevurah, it's still because Hashem loves us. And if we remember that and know that and somehow accept, by the way, do you know what tzaddikim would do? Don't do this at home because it's too tough. Tzaddikim would do in Gemara Brachos. They prayed for tests. Because of course, they want to get fitter. We shouldn't pray for tests anymore. Like, we're not on that level. We just need to pray that Hashem overcomes the tests, right? We should pray to accept it with love. That's a beautiful prayer. To dive into it, that we should accept it with love. But I don't think we're on the level we can pray for tests. Maybe there's some black belt Kabbalists there that can handle it. I'm out. I can't do that. Number 3. You ready? Number 3. Here we go. The beginning of this week's Sedra says, Vayem Hashem el Avram, Lech lecha, go lecha. What's lecha? Hashem should have just said, Lech, go. So anyone, what's Lech lecha?
Double go.
Go and come back.
No, it's Lech lecha. What's lecha?
Go.
So the simple translation is for yourself. The Kabbalistic translation is Lech lecha, go to yourself. Go to you. Go to you. Meaning become you. You got to become Kachi, you got to become Christy, we got to become you. Richard, when you go to the next world, Hashem is going to say, Richard, why weren't you like Abraham? He's going to say, were you like Richard? That's it. You've got to become Richard. Like the real Richard, the higher level Richard. Our job, and that's the Lech Lecha, which we all go through in our lives. We all go through this constant test, which, by the way, I'm going to say a question, which we're going to say one answer now, and at the very end, we're going to say one other answer. So they're not contradictory. We have many approaches sometimes in spirituality. So it says like this. There's a medrash that says the following question. By the Akedah, the highest test, the number 10 test, when Hashem said to Abraham to sacrifice his son, by the way, that doesn't get harder than that test. Like, I'm out of that test, thank you very much. My name might be Abraham and my son might be Isaac. No, I'm not doing that one, right? But for Abraham, that's why he was him and I am me. He could handle it. And he went and agreed to kill his son. We're taught, there's a medrash that says, Hashem looked at the test in this week's Sedra of going from your land, going from your father. And the test of going to slaughter your son, Hashem says, actually, I don't know what's better. What does it mean? Surely, the murdering your son, that's the pinnacle of love, that's the hardest test you could ever have. So it says the Nesiv Shalom, based on the Arizal, the reason why the Lech Lecha on this week's Sedra is as great is because this is the core test that we're all defined by. We're not defined by this one huge moment in our life. We're defined by the day in, day out need to find ourselves, to journey to ourselves, to become ourselves. And with this is solution number 3. Solution number 3, my friends, you have the answer. Hashem is never going to ask you to do something that you've got to become someone else to do it, right? You've got to have like a personality transplant to do it. You have the answer in it. We believe in this principle called innate health. So for example, let's say if it's a health issue, especially if it's an emotional issue or mental issue, we believe that you have it in you. If you could just find that treasure inside you, Lech Lecha is the solution to your test. And I really believe that, just to know that you have the solution. Too many people feel that I don't have the solution. If only I found that therapist, if only I found that drug, if only I found that matchmaker, then everything would be all right. I know. All you need is you and Hashem. Just nothing else. You, Hashem, you're good. Maybe Hashem might want to use someone else as a vessel. But once you know that you have the solution, that's going to help you pass the test. That's number 3. Number 4. So it says in Pirkei Avos the following thing. It says, let's quote the Pirkei Avot for you. Pirkei Avos chapter 5, number 9, Mishnah 19. It says, if you have 3 things, you're a student of Abraham. You know what those 3 things are? 3 things are a good eye, meaning you're kind, you see things in a generous way, humble, and nefesh fola. You're lowly. You look at yourself lowly. The question is, why doesn't it say, if you want to be a student of Abraham, just overcome the test? So it explains the Nesiv Shalom, and this is a big secret. This is secret number 4 for you. Solution number 4, which is the following. Solution number 4, see if I can find it. Giving to someone else, if you can. Too many people are so self-absorbed. We're so self-indulgent. We're just thinking about our problems and our challenges and our tests and our tests. Do you know what Abraham did? He was the quintessential giver. Whatever was happening in his life, his focus was still other people. He was into giving, volunteering, being hospitable, being generous. One of the greatest ways you're going to pass your test is to help other people with a test. And by the way, I'm very into, let's say someone who's struggling with like finding a relationship, try and focus on finding other people with relationships. Like try and get into matchmaking for other people, praying for other people. Like the more you can do for others, that's going to be a great way for you to pass your test. That's solution number 4. Solution number 5. Solution number 5 is the following. It says in that Mishnah that Abraham had 10 tests, v'omad bekulam. So omad means to stand, but omad, according to Kabbalah, means Amidah, the prayer, to pray. You want to pass the test? Don't complain. Don't groan. Just pray to Hashem. Talk to Hashem. Prayer really works. And this is one of the stories that I heard from Rabbi Weinberg last night. After the Holocaust, there was a family father and son, who were obviously broken. And they were stolen a chassid. And who is he going to marry? They've lost their whole family. There's not many people out there anymore. Everyone's been decimated. So they went to this great tzaddik of the Yanuka, this child prodigy rabbi in Frankfurt. As I said, I heard it from a different source. And they prayed, Hashem, please help me find. And they wrote what's called a kfittel, something that I know a lot of people do when they go to the Western Wall. They write a little note. You're meant to do it at a tzaddik as well. You go to the tzaddik, you put your name, your address, your email address, your WhatsApp, and you put it into there. So they did that. This was after the Holocaust, and they put it under a stone. A few weeks later, a father and a daughter comes, where the father wants to pray for his daughter to have a shidduch. How am I ever going to find a shidduch? And you can imagine how the story goes. He looks down and he sees a note under the brick. True story. And a bit cheeky, he reads it, sees the story. Another chassid, Baruch Hashem, they got married and lived happily ever after. True story. And many beautiful stories are like that by prayer really works, my friends. Prayer really works. And I would definitely recommend that. Definitely recommend, if you're going through suffering, Tehillim should be your best. Like, you don't need Prozac, you need Tehillim. You need Psalms. Also begins with a P, but that's about it, right? It's Psalms which will really help you. Finally, my friends. And this is for me the game changer. This got me to tears last night. So this was super powerful. Here we go. We asked the question before. There are these two lech lechos that Hashem says to Avraham, lech lecha, to go leave your land, go leave your father, go leave your country, go to a new world. And then he says it next week, Sedra, lech lecha, also go and kill your son. Explains Rabbi Shlomo Twersky the following. Different Rabbi Twersky, listen to this. Sometimes in life, do you know what the test is? To let go of the past. To detach from the past. Many of you watching tonight might be going through trauma of things that have happened to you in the past. The test is to let it go. To move forward. To move forward. Let go. And I think this Dr. Zeus said the great line, don't cry about the past, smile that it happened. Right? That we've got to just smile instead of crying. But that's one level of letting go. The next level of letting it go is don't think about the past, start living in the present. Says Rabbi Twersky, what was the second lech lecha? Listen to this. Hashem said to Avraham Avinu, kill your future. Kill your child. By the way, Hashem says to Abraham, your whole children, you're going to have the Jewish people, and they're all going to come out of Isaac in the bris ben Abasarim in the covenant. And then Hashem says to Avraham, kill your future. That was a test. He had to disconnect from his future. Says Rabbi Twersky, that's why they're the same test. Sometimes you've got to disconnect from the past. Sometimes disconnect from the future. And the goal is to live, to learn, live in the present. Any of you ever achieved that? You ever live in the now, any of you? Rabbi Nachman famously writes, there's a verse in Tehillim, Richard, that says, Hayoim b'kolu tishmo. Listen to God's voice today. Today. Says Rabbi Nachman, you've got to learn to live in the day. If you live in the day, you'll be happy. Worry and stress comes from either things that have happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. How am I going to get married? How am I going to have money? How am I going to... If you could just learn to not be trapped in the past and not be trapped, worried about the future, and just enjoy the present. Right now, please, just enjoy this. You're listening, learning with Rabbi Hill. What could be better, guys, right? What could be better, right? Just enjoy the now. Just enjoy the now. When you go home, just enjoy that. Don't worry about tomorrow. Do you know how many people have arguments about things that will never happen? Do you know how many marriages are broken about having arguments about something that was never going to happen, and then it really never happened? So let's just learn to live in that present. And Rabbi Moshe Weinberg says the most beautiful story, which really touched me. I hope you feel it as well, and we'll finish with this, and then happy to take questions. Again, it's a post-Holocaust story, but this one happens in Bnei Brak after the Holocaust. And imagine, that's the worst of the worst. however, hard the pandemic's been, that nothing compares to the trauma of the Holocaust. There was this Bob of a Chassid that after the Holocaust, his whole family decimated. He was broken, as you fully understand, totally broken, had no one left. And he was there, just wanted to give up Judaism, give up everything. And they said to him, there's a very great rabbi, who's like a young rabbi at that point. Maybe he can help you. He was called Rabbi Eliezer Menachem Shach, Rabbi Shach, Rav Shach, who I had the pleasure of meeting. And Rav Shach sat with him in his room, and Rav Shach said, tell me what you're going through. And he told him, like, why should I go on? I've got nothing left. I lost my dad. I lost my mum. I watched my wife die. I watched my kids die. Can't anymore. Can't go on. So Rav Shach sat there with him. And Rav Shach said, tell me, what dynasty of Hasidus do you come from? He goes, I come from what's called the Bobov Hasidus. Okay. So Rav Shach says, you don't have your mum anymore, you don't have your dad. But do you remember this song? And he started singing, and by the way, Rav Shach wasn't Hasidish at all. He was anything but. But he knew this Hasidish song. And he starts singing, la 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 la. And the Baba of a Chassid is like, okay, what's going on here? He says, start singing with me. So the Baba of a Chassid, he did remember the song. So he starts singing with, and the song gets faster. And Rav Shach says, we can still sing. We can still dance. And they got up and they started dancing. La 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 la. And that song and that dance changed this Baba V'Chassid's life. And for the first time since the Holocaust, he was able to let go just for a moment and start moving forward in his life. And what I urge you, my friends, especially if the test is a test of things that have happened in the past or worries about the future, sing, dance, be happy with what you have. It says in Pirkei Avos, who is a wealthy man? Someone who's happy with his lot. What you have is exactly what you need right now. Just enjoy it. Thank God you have that every day. Show gratitude for what you have here and right now. And by living in the present, by living in the now, that's what Avraham had to do. Hashem tested him. Can you leave the past behind? No problem. Can you leave the future? Hashem, I just want to be with you. I'm just happy. Whatever you give me, I'm happy. Whatever you give me, I'm happy. And if we can, please God, have that Avraham mentality, then please God, we can also overcome our test. One last thing, just when we overcome the test, you know what happens? Tremendous blessings. It says in the Torah, straight after he was tested, all of a sudden the letters of Hashem's name, Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, starts appearing, which is the name of mercy, the name of compassion. You see a lot, tremendous blessings and salvations happen straight after the test. So, Mitzvah Hashem, if any of you, we're all going through tests. Hashem, we should withstand it, overcome it, accept it with love, live in the now, do teshuvah, pray, do all what we need to do, and then please God, Hashem is going to send every single one of you and your loved ones tremendous blessings, salvations, and soon we'll be singing and dancing at the arrival of Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Amen. Any questions? Happy? Yes, Richard.
When you say pray, how would you formulate prayers?
So Richard, first of all, whatever works for you. So everyone's on their own journey. For some people, meditation works for you, but let's say because I know you like your meditation, but do your meditation, but then critically talk to God afterwards. So you're in that very calm place. So still when you got your eyes closed, have that conversation. Have that conversation. I always say, and I'll send you my talk I did last week called Why Pray? So that's kind of relevant, right? And it'll give you some of the levels of it. But TSB, say thank you, gratitude. Say sorry and say please. Say it with joy. Now, obviously, if you want to say a formal prayer with the Hebrew, it's even better. It opens up gates to the next world. We learned last week from Noah, from the Parsha, Hashem said to Noah, "Soa tasel teva, make a light in the teva." The Baal Shem Tov said, "Make a light in your words." He did a meditation, Richard, that when he said Shema, he would say the shin and see a light coming out of the shin. He would say a mem, see the light coming out. He would literally be visualizing light coming out of the letters. That's a really cool meditation I think you'd enjoy. Right? So there's many ways to pray, but the key thing is to open up your heart. I'll send you my recording to that.
Okay.
I'll send you. Any other questions?
You talked about the 10 tests,
Yeah.
right? 10 challenges that we all have. And you said that, was it Yaakov, that the last 17 years, whatever, kind of just enjoyed life. So does that mean that once...
Which is Vayechi Yaakov, the numerical value. Vayechi was 17.
Oh, okay. But so does that mean that once we go
26.
through the 10 tests that we then enjoy kind of life without
Yeah.
the challenges?
Yeah, then we can kind of retire, right? That's retirement.
So
You know.
So we should pray to have the challenges come to us,
Yeah.
like as quickly as possible, so we can just
Yeah.
pass the test.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, maybe some people do get tested a little bit later in life as well, but
No,
listen, it takes a very high level to say that I just ideally just want the test. That's like pretty sadistic, right? But or someone who just is on such a high level of loving Hashem. I think for us, we can pray to pass the test and then to enjoy a bit of tranquility. But here's the point. Real tranquility only happens in the world to come. This world isn't meant to be easy. If you get a little bit of easy, okay. But this world is meant to be for tests, for challenges, for growth. And then the next world, then you're going to chill out. You know, you come to my Shabbos table in the next world, and then we can really relax and really have some l'chaim and be part of that divine light because we've earned it. There'll be nothing greater than that. Do you know what I mean? But yes, of course, we should, when the blessing happens in this life, we say thank you, Hashem, and really enjoy it. But when that next test comes, instead of again skirting around it, say, okay, Hashem, obviously you feel that I'm growing again. The shell's ready to shed, and I need a greater shell on me. Yeah? Any other questions? Questions on Facebook, Instagram?
Is the metaphor you use when you get to, at the final part of your test, the battery is taken out and you see darkness.
Yeah.
And that really
You
stuck
ever
with
felt
me.
that?
Yeah, the whole time. How do you overcome that feeling before you get to the battery taken out? Because it's almost like it's
coming.
Happen. It's coming.
By the way, sometimes just like let it out.
So
just
I feel it's going to happen. So
yeah,
I
I think sometimes accelerate towards that point of giving up, because then you're gonna stop yourself going through another few months of pain. Like a certain point, you say, Hashem, I'm done. I can't fight it anymore. I'm downing my tools and then imploring you to help me. Yeshurun, if you're listening, Yeshurun always says the story of when he tried it, and then the moment he gave up and said, Hashem, over to you, his salvation came straight away. So it really works. It really works. Someone's on Instagram asked me a question. Life's hard. Why bring? Oh, good question. Asking if life's hard, why bring children into a world where they experience pain? Oh, Instagram, controversial. Like your question, love it. Right? Good question. He asked the question, why bring kids in the world if it's a world's about pain? So I really hope I didn't speak about pain, right? I was trying to speak about growth and about love and about magnifying Hashem's light into this world. And therefore, Hashem commands us to have children, because then give them the chance to bring Hashem's light and keep bringing that. So it's a huge mitzvah. And then you do what you can, not just to protect your children from pain or challenges, but to give your children the strength to deal with it when it comes to them. And that's real joy. That's real joy as a parent. Real joy as a parent when your kids can overcome their challenges themselves, because they've got the strength, they've learned the tradition of how to get through it themselves. Yeah, hopefully that's answers. But for sure, the challenges, listen, it's 10 challenges and you've got a lifetime of 120 years. I've just added 30 years, right? You've gone to the Moses. 120 years, right? So there's way more joy in this. And by the way, some people can even find joy in the challenges too, like King David did. Any other questions? Happy to take any other questions.
Yeah,
Harry.
So in the Torah, we see the move from Elohim
To Yud-Kei Vav-Kei.
So yes, so when Hashem becomes more merciful, that would indicate. But first, it's a few-part question. Firstly, why would there be a transition? And then secondly, to touch on Avraham and Yitzhak, at that point it's Elohim. Why is he giving him that test? Because he's not yet done anything wrong. So when we said about in point 2, the element of karma, and so getting what you have deserved, he didn't do anything to deserve that. And it seems like almost the worst thing you could ever do is kill your own child. So why give someone...
For Yitzhak, the test for Yitzhak or for Abraham?
For Abraham. Because he didn't warrant that test.
Sure,
perhaps.
of course. And that's why that's why we're trying to say, tests primarily aren't because we did things wrong. In my order of solutions, that's just kind of where I put it. But primarily they're there for growth. And Abraham was a good example of, people ask the question, what's so great about what Abraham did? There's been a lot of martyrs in Jewish history. There's been a lot of people who've given up their lives for God in Jewish history, in the Crusades and etc. But there says the Maharal, by Abraham doing that, he's given the strength for every single person to do that. He's the pioneer. We need to understand what's going on in the Torah this week is Maisa Avot, Siman Labanim. The actions of our forefathers are a code for the children. We can access spiritual greatness because they did. So they're not standalone. They're literally DNA of reality. That's what please don't look at the stories. It's just like some cool story about my great-grandparents. They are your spiritual DNA. You should all find one of the forefathers or matriarchs that you feel an affinity to and try and understand them and see what lessons they're trying to teach us. And that's the point. It says in the Torah, Harry, Bereshis bara Elokim. When God made the world, it was Elokim. But then as soon as Hashem made humanity, it was Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And that's what life's about, is that balance. And by the way, when you blow the shofar, Hashem's moving from the throne of Elokim to Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And by the way, it says in Gemara Brachos, God prays. You know that, Richard, you were saying, do you know Hashem prays? What does God pray? He prays for himself to move from justice to compassion.
During the shofar, though, on Rosh Hashanah, that's the interesting point of the year for that to happen, isn't it?
Because it's a day of din. It's a very tough day. Rosh Hashanah is tough, even though Crystal loves it's a favourite day. but maybe you can handle the din, right? Baruch Hashem, right? But I'm personally, actually this year with Uman it was different. It's a day of joy there. It's very interesting. There, Rabbi Nachman kind of invites his guests to have Rosh Hashanah with him. It's a day of incredible joy. Everyone's dancing and clapping and amazing. It's pretty cool, right? But most people find Rosh Hashanah quite tough. And that's why we need to move over to the shofar. We need the shofar. We need a bit of compassion. It's called the mamtik the dinim, to sweeten the judgments.
It comes at the end, the shofar blowing.
It does. But Musaf's like when it's all being decided. Musaf's when your year's being written out. So before the end of Musaf, we make sure we've given as many blows as we could possibly do. We're blowing the shofar right, left and centre to make sure there's as much mercy as we can prior to the verdict being written out. Any other questions? Thank you very much, everybody. And please God, join me next week, Sunday night, Path of the Just, Wednesday night, the Parsha class. Lots of love. Good night.